Hey everybody, so I just found out that I passed all three of the PE exams in California, so I decided to make a quick video to share my experience and give you all some tips that will hopefully help you guys pass as well. So I'll start out by talking a little bit about the exam, what's on it, the passing scores, etc. I'll then kind of go over what I did to prepare and talk about what worked from that and what didn't. And I'll wrap it up with some recommendations for resources for you to use, some recommendations on preparation, and some test taking strategies. So let's begin. Okay, so let's talk about the exam. Surveying is one of three exams that you have to pass to get your civil engineering PE license in California. It's 55 questions. They're all equal weight, and there's no penalty for guessing. You have 2.5 hours, which is a very short duration, and that time constraint is by far the most challenging aspect of the exam. One of those exams that if you don't immediately know how to solve a problem, just flag it, make your best guess, and move on. There's a chance that you'll be able to return to it at the end and try and sort it out, but honestly, you probably won't have time. Um, right when you start the exam, you'll get a short tutorial on how to use Prometrics testing system. I highly recommend taking it. It shows you how to flag questions. It shows you how to highlight important information, and shows you how to cross out answers that you know are wrong. These are all useful tools during the exam if you use them correctly. So historically, around 35 to 45% of people who take the exam pass each cycle. I remember when I first read that stat, I was surprised at how low that was, but I think it's mostly related to the time constraints. Especially for the surveying exam, the problems and topics aren't very hard. It's just testing your ability to answer them fast. So as long as you're prepared for that aspect of the exam, it's not overly difficult. I'd say 60 to 75% of the questions are calculation based and the rest are knowledge based. So you should know everything on the exam specifications, which you can download from the board website. But definitely pay special attention to horizontal and vertical curves, traverses, volume calcs, and area calcs. So that's your like crisscross method and your double meridian distance method. Those topics alone probably make up 60% of the exam, so don't skip over them. Yeah, a question that is probably on everyone's exam is what type of surveying can civil engineers legally do and what surveying can they not do? Um, Apparently, you need around 55% of the questions right to pass, although take that with a grain of salt because they stopped publishing those stats years ago. And there's a lot of discussion online about what that number actually is, but honestly, I don't think anyone outside of the testing staff really knows. So just aim for a high score and don't waste too much time trying to sort it out. As far as calculators, you don't have the same restrictions as you have for the PE. Although you should probably just use the same calculator because you're probably already used to it, and anything that saves time during the exam is beneficial. And just one more piece of advice with the calculator. All the angles are given to you in degrees, minutes, and seconds. So just make sure that you know how to use those functions on your calculator. Okay, so let's talk about the most important part. Preparation. I took all three PE exams in the same cycle, so I can only spare about 50 hours to study, and I was able to pass on that. I'd probably recommend a little bit more, 75 to 100 hours maybe. I've read elsewhere online that up to 150 hours is recommended, but it probably depends on your skill level and what kind of engineering you do, since some disciplines have more exposure to surveying concepts than others. The first thing you should do is look up the exam specifications on the board's website, print it out, and put it as the first page of your notebooks. It basically tells you exactly what's on the exam, so you should be referring to it throughout your studies to make sure that you're still on track. Um, you can there's a few good free resources out there that if you're really in a pinch, you might be able to get by just on those. Basically, NCs, the body that issues the 8-hour P exam, they also have an exam for professional land surveyors, and they've put together a very useful and free equation sheet for their examinees that also has some other related surveying materials. It's similar to what they do for the FE exam. So Google NCEES space PS reference handbook. It's a PDF, it's free. Not everything in there is useful, but the first couple pages are equation sheets, and they do an excellent job of covering most of the materials, but not all of the topics. So you'll need more than that. Another resource that you probably already have is the PE CERM, or the Civil Engineering Review Manual. There's a few chapters in the transportation section. I think it's chapter 18 and 19 or 17, somewhere around there, that covers plane surveying, curves, volumes, topo maps, GPS, and all that good stuff. It's all all that material is on the exam as well. I also use the CERM to look up a few of the knowledge questions during the exam itself. So definitely bring your CERM to the exam. I also used the Surveying Principles by Cuomo. I unfortunately cannot recommend it. His writing I thought was awful. His explanations of simple concepts are curiously convoluted and unclear. I think it's terrible for quick lookup of definitions, since most of those definitions are embedded in large paragraphs, so they're super hard to find if you're in a pinch. I think his index is basically useless. One of the hardest aspects of studying for this exam is the lack of practice problems available. So if you already have access to this, it's useful in the sense that there's a lot of questions so you can practice, but definitely don't solely rely on this. And if you don't already have access to it, I would say don't bother. A much better resource is Dr. Mansour's book. I didn't get his textbook, although I hear it's excellent. Instead, I bought the 2 practice exams because I had already had the Cuomo book. These practice exams, they're the closest type of question to the actual exam that I could find, although they're still pretty different. It's still the best practice out there, in my opinion, and the first several pages is basically just a summary of all the concepts and equations. So for the most part, you can just tab this book out, and that's everything you need. But a lot of the definitions and knowledge questions aren't in here, so again, I wouldn't rely on this solely, but this is definitely a powerful tool. I also used the 120 Solved Survey Problems by Boniface. That book I thought was good for practice, because again, practice, that's the best way to prepare for the exam, but the questions are quite different from the exam itself, so I don't know, I could take it or leave it. From what I used, I'd say Mansour's is probably your best bet. So that basically concludes my recommendations for the surveying exam. You know, I think there's some risk in underestimating the surveying exam, because I'm sure many of you agree most topics in civil engineering are more difficult than surveying. So it's important not to underestimate it, since the exam is not trivial and it can be difficult, and it's better to put the time in now and do it properly so you're not stuck going through the whole process again. You know, it's expensive and can definitely be emotionally taxing. If you're doing all 3 PE exams in the same cycle, it's definitely more difficult, and it's far more critical to plan your studying properly and manage your time. That being said, it absolutely can be done. If surveying is not your strong point and you're worried, take a review course. But don't think that a review course is a substitute for practice. Even after you understand all the concepts, you'll still need a solid 20 hours or more, in my opinion, of just doing practice problems to get your speed and confidence on point. I can't stress that enough. I wish you all the best of luck, and I encourage you all to come back and share your experiences in the comments below after you sit the exam. These types of discussions help me a lot, and I really do believe they're beneficial for the community at large. So good luck, and make sure you get your 8 hours of sleep every night.